Hello, everyone. Welcome to Desert Sage Podcast. I'm your host, Greg Beffert, coming to you on the 23rd of May, 2025 from Oak Creek Vista Park, just outside of Sedona, Arizona. Thank you for being here. It's been a while since I've done a walk and talk. This one's not going to be a walk and talk. I got an issue with the left foot here that's been bothering me, so I won't be doing much walking today. In any case, we're up here enjoying my wife's birthday. We spent some time in Cottonwood, in Sedona. Went on a 3-hour spiritual tour of Sedona. And if you're not familiar with Sedona, it's highly known for its metaphysical, energy vortexes, things of that nature. So Wendy and I, being both spiritual people as opposed to religious, we decided to go on this tour, and it was wonderful, beautiful. We've seen some parts of Sedona that we had not seen before. We went to see some ancient Indian ruins. So we all of this area here is just beautiful, Red Rock area of Sedona. So we spent a few days up here just trying to reconnect. This is what we do a lot of times. We've been busy at the house, working on gardens and finish up our second chicken coop. Just got it done here not too long ago. So this is an opportunity for us before it starts getting real hot, finish up our projects and get away for a little bit. And there's very few places on earth that are like this region here, Sedona and Cottonwood. And Cottonwood's just a really quaint little town. A lot of neat little shops and things of that nature. So we got up here to just get away and to recharge our batteries. It's important to do that. I stopped going to the Board of Supervisors meetings, as many of you probably are aware. I said what I had to say, and I watched the 3 supervisors that I was there to address walk out the door, and I kept my word that I would stay there as long as I needed to make sure that they were exposed and see them leave. But in any case, I've been posting some content on Facebook that I want to clarify some things for people when it comes to my position on Zionism, particularly and Jews and the Jewish people. First of all, I'm going to recommend that you do, like I've recommended before. If you've never watched any of my videos before, go back as far as you need to, and I'd recommend the very beginning to put this in context, the things I teach about natural law, the occult, mysticism, things of that nature, the human psyche, consciousness. Go back to the beginning and watch these videos so that you can put what it is that I'm trying to do in context. Otherwise, I've said it before, you jump into the middle of one of my Board of Supervisors meetings where I talk about Zionism and the Jewish supremacy and control over our Congress and a lot of institutions in this country, and you're going to think, well, this guy's he's just a raving, anti-Semite. It's important to define terms. And I try to do that as we go along here. And I tried to do that during the Board of Supervisors meetings too, when I talked about what it means to be a Jew, what is a Jew, what it means to be a Zionist, and things of that nature. So go back and look at those videos. But I wanted to clarify a couple things here. Number one, I don't hate anybody. I don't hate. I just don't. I'm here. The reason I put these videos together and have been doing this work is to try to help educate people about natural law, about how the human psyche works, the current human condition of slavery. I've talked about all those things. I've worked with people in my law enforcement and military careers. I've worked with people of every ethnicity that you can imagine. Race, if you believe in that as a human construct or a construct of reality or not, race is not important to me, never was. It didn't matter to me whether or not I was wrestling around with, a person of color or a white person doing my job. It just didn't matter. If someone was trying to take my gun from me, none of that stuff matters. And so my point is that I don't hate the Jewish people. And when I talk about Zionism, I make a distinction. It's important not to conflate a lot of these terms. It's important to not conflate Zionism with Judaism. It's important to not conflate the Jews with all Jews. If you're Christian, and I've talked about this before, the Jews, the Sadducees, Pharisees, and the like, they're the ones responsible for killing Christ. But not all Jews were. Many other Jews converted and followed Christ after that. The same race, the same ethnic group of people, no difference in their DNA. So let's make sure that we have that distinction, that when I talk about the Jews, I'm talking about Jewish, the elite supremacists, the religious elite, Jews too, the master manipulators, the ancient psychologists. They understand the human psyche. They know how it works. And this goes back, these bloodlines go back a long, long way to antiquity, human antiquity. And it's not just Jews. When I talk about the top of that pyramid, that power pyramid, and who's at the top running it, look, Jews have a tremendous amount of influence and control, and the Zionist lobby in the United States has a tremendous amount of control over Congress, power over the media, Hollywood, education institutions. They have a tremendous amount in the United States currently, and it's been building up for a couple hundred years now. But they're not the ones, running the world, and I'm not claiming that they are. You have Brahmins, from India, that class of that caste system, and there are other ethnicities at the top, bloodlines that go back again. This ruling class, this powerful elite, goes back, thousands of years in terms of their bloodline. So it's not just Jews. I just want to put that out on the table. It's when I talk about our country right now, currently, yes, the Jews have a tremendous amount of power and control over, including the President of the United States, which is a whole other topic that at some point I'm going to get into. But Donald Trump, and I'm sorry, for those of you that still believe in a political solution, is probably the most loyal president to Israel that we've ever had. And if you were honest with yourself, and you look back at the things that he's done, and to include his family, the loans that he's taken out, from Jewish billionaires. He's been indebted to them since he started, the Trump trade, the trade name. So it happens to be that way in our country now, and it's not just in the United States. The Jews, when I speak of them, the at the top, if you want to look at it as you have left-wing communist Jews, right-wing Zionist Jews, but at the top, where it overlaps, where that Vesica Pisces overlaps, is international, communism, and the international Jews in that circle. They yield as much power and influence in Western nations, France, Australia, the UK, Canada, as they do in the United States. Do the research, and that's the other thing is, again, people can get pissed off at me. A lot of times it's, I don't like the way he dresses. I don't like the way he talks. He uses profanity. Whatever, they don't like my tone, whatever the case is, but they never ask themselves, is what he's saying true or not? Forget, my attire, might be my age, some of you might be turned off just by the fact that I was a cop. You don't like the messenger. And so you automatically throw the baby out with the bathwater. Instead of, look, I don't, nobody has all the answers, myself included, and I never claim to. And I make a lot of mistakes. I'm learning. I'm going through this journey like many other people are, trying to discover truth and trying to represent truth. I use the trivium process, to analyze, I use my intuition, to help me seek the truth and discernment. So, back to the Jewish issue. I have Jewish friends, and it's important for you to understand the distinctions that, not all Jews, the 2% in the United States, not all of them are religious, and definitely not all of them over in Israel are religious Jews. You have secular, most of the people in Israel are secular. They're not religious Jews. You have Orthodox. There's all, you need to do the research. There's a couple of books that I'd recommend. One by Shlomo Sand, the Invention of the Jewish Identity, is the name of that book. So there are books out there that talk about the different types of Jews that are out there, and there are books that talk about Zionism. A lot of them that I would recommend. There's books by E. Michael Jones, The Jewish Revolutionary Spirit. The Holocaust Narrative is another book that I'd highly recommend. And see, a lot of people, you can go back as far as World War II, and speaking of the Holocaust narrative, and I've mentioned this before, whether you believe in the Holocaust in its entirety or not is not important. In the UK now, and in many places in Germany, if you deny that there were 6 million killed in the Holocaust, if you say there were 5,999,000, just that act alone, denying the number of Jews that were killed, how they were killed, all of that can be labeled as anti-Semitism. And that's my concern now, and the reason I point out the obvious here with the Jewish influence and power is that we are creeping towards a censorship and which enhances totalitarianism and authoritarianism. Look at how many anti-Semitism bills have been passed, by Congress. No other group gets the special treatment that the Jews do, and Israel particularly. You cannot criticize Israel. And then, of course, they have their own definition of what anti-Semitism is, and it's basically the International Holocaust Remembrance Association's definition, which is any criticism of Israel. You can't speak about Jewish power or the Jews killed Christ, and none of those things. Passing legislation, to censor people and define people, college students, and the anti-Semitism bills that have been passed on campus. I've talked about those before. So my concern, and you want to talk about, where our country's going, and people are concerned about socialism and communism it's here, and what we need to do is, first of all, recognize it for what it is. Recognize it for what it is. We have the ability, but first we have to know that there's a problem. We have to recognize the fact that there is this Zionist control over our country.
The majority of Gen Z have an unfavorable impression of Israel. And my friends, I think the reason for that is that we're losing the digital war. Okay, they're getting their information from TikTok and whatever it is, and we're losing that war. When you think about it, the masters of the universe are Jews. You know, we've got Altman and AI, we got Zuckerberg, we got Sergey Brin, we got the whole group across the board. Jan Combs, founded WhatsApp. It's us. And we have to figure out a way to win the digital battle. Amelia, we got to get our digital sneakers on so that the truth can prevail over the lies. And when we do that, the future of Israel will be stronger because a majority of all Americans will support Israel. We'll make that happen. We have to make it happen. Thank you. Baruch Hashem. Thank you.
In almost every aspect, and it's international. And these elite are pushing us towards a technocracy. You know, everybody from Elon Musk to the people that Trump invited to the White House, Altman and these other technocrats. These people want to push us towards a technocratic society. And if you don't understand about technocracy, this started way back in the 20s and 30s. These technocrats, and it involves eugenics. I know a lot of people don't want to hear that, but when you look back honestly at what we went through with COVID-19, and if you can't tell yourself that this was part of a eugenics project, there were other agendas along with it, but the harm that they have caused, and it was intentional. This is whether it's spraying the skies, poisoning our food, or our water, or the medicine that we take, or the next pandemic. There is an obvious and blatant attempt to depopulate the planet. These eugenicists believe that there's just too many people, too many to control, and heaven help them if they ever get organized. And, when you talk about Jewish people and the organization, one thing that you have to understand that they are very ethno-tribal in nature, and they're very organized. There's hundreds of Jewish organizations in the United States. Many of them are political action type organizations. Some are for helping Israel, Jewish American organizations to help Israel. But they are extremely organized and collective in their approach. And that's what communism is collectivism. That's exactly what it is. It values the collective over the individual. And our country was founded on individual rights, individual principles of natural law. That's what our country was founded on, not the collective. And that's, those are two dichotomies that we constantly deal with here, is the individual versus the collective. The rights of the individual versus the greater good of the whole. And Jews, Jewish people, ethnic Jews understand this. And a lot of it has to do with, in their minds, a victimhood over, not only the Holocaust from World War II, but throughout the centuries. Go back and, again, do the research. Find out how many countries they've been kicked out of. 109 plus countries, over 1,000 times. Many countries, multiple times, got kicked out. And a lot of it had to do with their usury, depravity, and blood libel.
Okay, I'm going to refer you to this document, which is the complete list of 1,030 Jewish expulsions in human history. You can find that at archive.org, and this is a place where a lot of documents that have been removed from the internet can be found. So I'd recommend you go there, just type in that title, and just start going through it. You'll find that many of the expulsions have to do with the things that I've mentioned before. Usury, depravity, blood libel, So I'd recommend that you pull this document up, just flip through there, and you'll find all the reasons. And again, there's, they cite sources. It's not like this is stuff that is just being made up. They cite the sources for these. It goes all the way up into the modern day, up to and through World War II and into the 50s and 60s, and all the way, you'll notice here at the end here, 2014, San Juan La Guana in Guatemala, due to lack of contact with locals. Now, a lot of times they don't, tell you exactly what it is, but there's something that prompts these countries to expel these people, and generally it's one of those three categories. So I'd highly recommend that you go and look it up. People talk about the diaspora, and but they don't know why. Well, why is it that they were kicked out of all these countries, and why is it that they appear to be the victims in all these cases? Well, there's a partial answer.
Starved to death, in camps, during the war. We interned Japanese American citizens in this country, which a lot of people aren't even aware of. We did those things. And so the Holocaust narrative was pushed in front of us, number one, to make the United States, look good. We were the heroes, and Trump touts that, if it wasn't for us, World War II, we wouldn't have conquered the communists. Well, guess what? It wasn't about us. Russia carried the weight during World War II. So let's be honest about our involvement, and let's be honest about what we did, the war crimes that we committed, and the war crimes that we continue to commit on behalf of Israel. We support them. We give them the money, and then for those of you that say, look, that's Israel, that's a country that's in the Middle East, it has nothing to do with me, I don't even care about it. You need to pay attention. You need to pay attention, because it does impact you. Your tax dollars are going towards genocide. Whether you like it or whether you believe it or not, we fund that country. We give it billions of dollars in not only military aid, but humanitarian aid, foreign aid. We fund it, and we fought, about to fight, the seventh country on their behalf since 9/11. Go look at General Wesley Clark's comments about the 7 countries that, that we were going to invade, Iran being the last.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who used to work for me, and one of the generals called me in. He said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They've just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, he said, I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran." The truth is about the Middle East is, had there been no oil there, it would be like Africa. Nobody is threatening to intervene in Africa. The problem is the opposite. We keep asking for people to intervene and stop it. And there's no question that the presence of petroleum throughout the region has sparked great power involvement. Whether that was the specific motivation for the coup or not, I can't tell you, but there's always been this attitude that somehow we could intervene and use force in the region.
And we've been to every one of them on behalf of Israel. And, look, this has nothing to do with God's chosen people, and I've talked about that before. Israel was created intentionally for geopolitical, military, and strategic purposes. Basically, to destabilize the Arab countries. And obviously, the resources that go along with it. Whether it's, we destroy them via regime change, or through outright kinetic war, on behalf of Israel and Israel's interests. So, I don't know what to tell the people that still have this, the religious Zionists, the Christian Zionists, because they're the biggest problem. It's not the small number of Zionist Jews controlling these evangelical, Christians and their faith leaders. They control them. And they get their congregations cheering for Israel and supporting Israel at all costs, believing that, that's the Holy Land, and not having any idea what Tel Aviv is all about now. And, it's been known as the gay capital of the world, and a lot of people aren't even aware of that. That's not the whole. Look what they've done to the Holy Land. Look what they've done to the Palestinians and the Arabs, the Muslims and the Christians. And we support that. So you can't distance yourself from your culpability, by saying, hey, I'm not interested in what happens over there. No, you need to pay attention to what's happening over there, because they're live streaming a real Holocaust now for everybody to see, and you can't turn away from it anymore, and you can't deny your complicitness. And if you cheer on, these politicians and their blind support for Israel, it's the Christian Zionists that they've hooked, and that's the majority, of their support base, and they understand that. Trump understands that.
Get out and vote just this time. You won't have to do it anymore. 4 more years, you know what? It'll be fixed. It'll be fine. You won't have to vote anymore, my beautiful Christians. I love you, Christians. I'm a Christian. I love you. Get out. You got to get out and vote. In 4 years, you don't have to vote again.
85 of my 81 years I have spent at universities all over the country and all over the world. There is no more important event in those 65 years to turn universities away from being bastions of hatred and discrimination than this executive order being signed today. It is a game changer. It will go down in history as one of the most important events in the 2,000-year battle against anti-Semitism. Thank you, Mr. President.
So, but in any case, I'm not going to go on too much longer on this one. It's just been a while, and I needed to come up here and recharge. This is just such a beautiful country up here. You've got to, if you get an opportunity to get down this way, you got to go check it out. I've also been posting a lot of work on consciousness and Facebook posts and that. And again, my posts and my content is not for everybody. It's not. My target audience, as many of you know, is military and law enforcement, particularly retired military and law enforcement, but those that are still active duty, in-service people. But a lot of my content spills over into the general population as well when I start talking about spirituality, consciousness and the human mind, how our consciousness is being manipulated. I mentioned, COVID-19 is the prime example, and that's what activated me. When I saw that, that's what really activated me into, getting out there and talking about natural law, teaching natural law, speaking out in public. And, I don't mind the criticism, from people. I don't have all the answers. I don't claim to have all the answers. I'm trying to get you to do the work. You've got to start thinking for yourselves. Quit allowing them to spoon feed you through the media, including social media. If you're scrolling through and getting your information from Facebook every day, just scrolling alone, you got to stop doing that. They understand how, Facebook and these other social media, platforms are, they understand your psyche. It's a social validation feedback loop, and that's all it is. And before long, most people find themselves doing this and just scrolling through their phone. I see it, Stop scrolling and pick up a book, read a book, read a book, and encourage your kids. If you have kids and grandkids, encourage them to read. The education system stifles their imagination enough as it is, and these devices, including cell phones, they need to be put down. They're not an advantage. They're not going to help you learn. They're not going to help you grow in consciousness. What they are is a distraction, a device used to consume your time and attention. So, read. I don't just point out problems either. I've also, people sometimes, you don't point out solutions. Well, yeah, I've pointed out many solutions. And on, my Facebook posts, I talk about meditation. There are a lot of different methods and ways to get introduced into meditation. And I highly recommend it. The objective, is to control your mind, not let it control you. And again, it'll either pull you into the past with worry and regret, or tug you into the future, with anxiety and worry about what is to occur, instead of leaving you in the present moment. And that's where you belong. Practice present moment awareness, which is another, solution that I talk about. My wife and I are doing the best we can to separate ourselves from these systems, and try not to rely as much on these systems. We try to grow our own food. We'll be having chicken soon. Our next project's a livestock pen. So we're trying to, run our own parallel systems. We're not as reliant on the monetary system, the food system, all of these systems that are designed to enslave, So I'd recommend that you look at doing the same things, I think it's important as a father and as a husband and as somebody who, studied leadership, is to lead by example. Whether it's my physical fitness, or whether it's speaking in public, or prompting other people to do the things that I'm doing, like gardening and things of that nature. It's important to lead by example. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of leadership in this country, in our county. We have politicians, but we don't have leaders. And that needs to change. People need to vet these people for their character, not so much their competency, although that's important, but vet them for their character. So there are a lot of solutions. There are, we use cash as often as we can. And for now, while the dollar has any value at all, which unfortunately we're being pushed towards, a centralized system, monetary system. Everybody, you see it, and it's been happening. Again, this didn't happen overnight. It's the frog in boiling water. They get people accustomed to credit cards, and then it becomes more convenient to just tap your credit card, and then pretty soon it'll be real convenient to have a chip, And whether you have a chip or not implanted, my point is that whether you use your telephone or whether you use a chip in your hand or whatever, they're pushing us towards a centralized digital currency, central bank digital currency. And once that happens fully, then they can control what you buy, what you sell, who you buy from, who you sell to, all of those things. And a lot of people that are religious people, I know because I talk to them, and I studied Christianity, for many, many, many years. They point to the end times and, the things that we're going through now, and Revelation and the mark of the beast and all that. And I look at it in a little more esoteric, with a little more esoteric eyes, I guess, than literal. And to me, the mark of the beast, there'll be a mark on the forehead or on the hand. The forehead is what you think. It's your thoughts. And the mark on your hand is your actions. It's the things you do. So in thought and in deed, if you take the mark of the beast or become part of this system, and set aside your spirituality and the other things that Christ taught, then you'll be a slave to that system. And we already have a condition of human slavery here on this planet as it is. Whether you're a debt slave, again, whether you're a slave to your addictions or your vices, or literal slavery. Look at human trafficking. People think slavery, doesn't exist anymore. It exists, and it exists in a variety of different overt and covert forms. People just, they've been told that they live in the land of the free and the home of the brave so often that, drilled into their heads that they've been conditioned to believe it. But the reality is different. So, I try to get people to, to elevate their consciousness, and there are a lot of things that you can do. There are a lot of good books and reference material on the human mind and consciousness and how it affects us. But quite simply, consciousness is pattern recognition, recognizing patterns both within yourself and in the external environment, within, without. Recognizing those patterns, and in my business, and my wife was a crime analyst, so pattern recognition was a real big part of what she did, particularly. It's also you could consider it a state of awareness, an elevated state of awareness. It's consciousness is like everything else is on a continuum. There are varying degrees of consciousness. And the idea is to elevate your level of consciousness. And I understand people that are not retired, that haven't been retired, for 12 years like I have. You don't have time, and that's, they keep you on that hamster wheel. And I get it. I understand. My kids go through it. They don't have time to study this stuff. They don't have time to really sit down. Most of them don't have time to sit down and reflect for 5 minutes on the things that I'm talking about here. I might as well be speaking Japanese to a lot of younger people, particularly, that are just trying to raise a family. I get it. Again, on the path, if you want to call it that, the path that we're all on, there are varying degrees. We're at various different levels here. And, I if I've said some things that seem demeaning or condescending, that's not my intent. And if I say some things that hurt your feelings, but yet are true, I'm not going to apologize for that. But we're all at different degrees of growth on our path, and my goal is to help as many people as I can by planting seeds. I'm not going to drag people along. I understand that, and a lot of the things that I say people aren't going to get. But I know for a fact that I've planted some seeds, and by the feedback I get from people, I've been getting a lot of, positive feedback, and people inquiring, wanting to know more, and a lot of it takes place in personal encounters. And that's really where it's at, is personal face-to-face encounters with people. I do this online because of the reach. I have a much greater reach online, especially to my target audience. So I do both. I try to talk to people about these things and, try to breach the topic about, consciousness and the occult, the hidden powers of, at the top of that power pyramid. And ultimately, at the very, very top of that power pyramid, there's a lot of theories about, those at the top. Is it the Anunnaki? Is it aliens? Is it, some, demonic force, at the top? And I don't know. I think that right now, and I'm speculating. And if I speculate, I'm going to tell you I'm speculating. It's an energy right now. This force that controls this planet and humanity is an energy, and it's not necessarily a benevolent one. And I don't want to get into that a whole lot right now, but everything is energy, and I've talked about this before. Everything is energy, and energy, can either be transmuted, it can be, changed in essence, it can be stored. If you think about, energy, electricity, and magnetism, the two primary, sources, and then there's electromagnetism, the third. That's kind of your trinity or your triangle. We have electricity, we have magnetism, and we have electromagnetism, a combination of the two. Everything is energy, and as such, energy can't be destroyed. It can only be transmuted or stored. So at the very top, it has to be energy. At the very top of that power pyramid has to be energy, unseen energy, occult, which is hidden, energy. We have occult, we have an occult ruling class. Most people don't know the names of the people at the very top, near the top of that elite, quote unquote elite. I call them predators, that class of people. You'll never know their names, most of them. They're not put out in the public eye. No, you might know a few, the Rothschilds and, DuPonts and a lot of these other, families. You might know some of them, but the real power at the top has no name. And the people you'll never know. The ones actually pulling the levers. The very small, group of people pulling the levers on the billions, controlling the billions. And that's how that works. So, if you're interested in and learning more about consciousness and meditation and things of that nature, there are some books that I can recommend. I can post up on my website in the blog section some recommended readings for books. There's also some subject matter experts on some of these topics as well that I'll list up there, put up there for you to review, and some links to some videos I think will be helpful in helping you, whether it's with meditation or understanding, human consciousness, and the fact that, we have limited sensory capabilities. We can only see so far on the visual spectrum. We can only hear so much, taste, feel, touch, all of those things, including sense, our other senses, the senses that are hidden and are latent in most people. There are some books that I can recommend to help you if you. I have some friends that feel like they're empaths. They have a sensing. They can feel when people are, and they can see emotional auras around people. So there are some books, if you're interested in those things, I can post some of that up there as well. But primarily the topics are going to be, consciousness, how to develop, your knowledge and understanding using the Trivium method. Again, we're like computers, folks. We are not computers, but we're like computers in that we're programmable. From the day we come out of the womb, everything that we take in through our senses as children is data, and it's information, and some of it's fucked up information, and a lot of people live some very traumatic childhoods, and part of this work too, and raising your consciousness, is doing that shadow work and going in and dealing with your traumas and your fears, and you can only do that, if you take the time and you have the intent, to want to learn and to want to grow. And again, I understand a lot of people don't have that time. And a lot of people, though, even if they did have that time, wouldn't take it. This stuff for a lot of people is woo. It's, but you don't understand. And what I do is that because I've, studied the scientific aspect of this as well, of consciousness and of energy and of spirituality, and and I've come to the conclusion that our genes are not the determinant factor in what happens to us or our reality, and that we have a lot of control over a lot of aspects of our existence here, but a lot of it has to do with our mindset. Are you a victim? And there's a tremendous sense of victimhood, learned helplessness out in this world today. On the other hand, a lot of people's, egos are grandiose. When we talk about ego, and your worldview and things of that nature, you can have an ego that is very destructive, self-destructive. You could have one that's self-loathing, and has no self-respect or self-love. Or you can have just the other end of that spectrum, that continuum, a grandiose ego, a megalomaniac, a psychopath, who's, the only existence is their own. The only thoughts are their own. The only thing that matters is their desires. So I'll post some information up on those topics as well. I just wanted to touch base and let you know that I'm going to continue creating content. I'm going to get back into it again, primarily dealing with the topics I talked about here. I said what I had to say in front of the Board of Supervisors, and I think it's important for people to go back and watch those as well, because in those 3-minute sessions, I talk many times about the human mind. I talk about consciousness. I talk about that power pyramid. I talk about the legitimate and illegitimate authority and what they did during COVID. So there are things that in understanding natural law, if you want to understand it, that you can glean from those presentations, those 3-minute presentations. So in any case, I'm not going to go on much longer here. I appreciate your time and your attention. Those are the spiritual currencies, and you need to be aware of that. And most people, again, when it comes to understanding the human mind and the psyche and how programmable we are, most people will shy away from even considering the fact that they can be manipulated and programmed to believe certain things. They just don't accept it. They think that their thoughts are their own because they get to choose what type of cereal they have for breakfast, or they get to decide how fast they drive. Your mind is not your own, and the sooner you can free your mind and look at reality not the way you want it to be, look at the world the way you want it to be, you look at the world the way that it truly is, and you look at it with a whole new set of eyes. When you take off, you eliminate the traumas, the fears, the biases, the inconsistencies, the contradictions. That's part of that trivium process. Input, processing, output. It's systems thinking. You've got to weed out all the logical fallacies and inconsistencies, the information that you take in, process it, and then what do you do with the information that you have? Wisdom is what you do with what you know. So I do these not because I'm, hoping to get pulled onto the Joe Rogan podcast, because of my great work and how well it's known. That's not going to happen. I do know that I've affected some people in a positive way. And the things that I'm doing might not be suitable for a lot of people. You might not like what I'm doing, the things that I have to say, but I feel I have a moral obligation to do what I'm doing and to say the things that I'm saying, and to try to teach people about natural law and human consciousness, and to try to liberate people and plant those seeds. And for those that are overly critical, or don't want to choose to listen to my message, go listen to somebody else. That's fine. But what are you doing? Ask yourself, what are you doing, to help, grow your consciousness, to grow spiritually? What are you doing to try to help free humanity and give people a better understanding of the reality of what's occurring in our true human condition? So with that, I'll leave it there. Thank you, and I hope to talk to you soon. I appreciate it. Take care.
Lobby the executive, but as we were talking about, there was a discussion earlier about Congress being representative to the people. Well, the White House has to be responsive to Congress, and so it's working with the time our friends on the Democratic side of the aisle to apply pressure the way that they know how to an administration, as it will be with this administration. But I was talking about the people who will get appointed into some of these jobs. Look at the top level. You talk about Marco Rubio and Elise Stefanik. Michael Waltz. Those three people have something in common. They all serve in Congress. They all have relationships with key APAC leaders from their communities. So the lines of communication are good. Should there be something questionable or curious that we need access on the conversation to? You never doubt. One of the first candidates I ever met with as an APAC professional in my job as being candidates for Congress was a guy named John Ratcliffe. He was challenging a longtime incumbent member of Congress in Dallas. This guy looks like he could win the race, and we go talk to him. He had a good understanding of the issues, and a couple of weeks before he took the oath as the CIA director, for crying out loud. He was the guy that we had a chance to speak to. So there are I won't call them lifelines, but there are lifelines.